Chapter 1. The Brutal Truth Nobody Tells You. Listen closely. I'm about to tell you something that might sting a little. Picture yourself exactly 1 year from today. Same room, same routine, same excuses echoing in your head like a broken record. Same distractions pulling you in every direction except forward. Same half-finished dreams collecting dust in the corner of your mind. Now tell me honestly, which hurts more? The pain of pushing yourself today or the regret of wasting another year tomorrow? Here's the raw truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. The majority of us never change because we're waiting. Waiting for what? For that magical moment when motivation strikes like lightning. We tell ourselves stories. One day I'll feel ready. One day the stars will align. One day I'll wake up with boundless energy and unstoppable drive, and that's when I'll start. But let me ask you this. Has that day ever actually come? This audiobook isn't here to coddle you. It's not a gentle pat on the back or a sugar-coated pep talk. This is about dismantling a dangerous lie that society has been feeding you since childhood. The lie that discipline is some soft, fluffy concept, that it's about finding the right mindset or waiting for the perfect timing. Discipline is none of those things. Discipline is a ruthless decision. It's a contract you sign with your future self, written in moments of discomfort and sealed with action when every fiber of your being screams, "Not today." And here's what nobody warns you about. Until you learn to force yourself, nothing sticks. Nothing transforms. Nothing compounds into the life you're dreaming about while lying in bed scrolling through other people's highlight reels. In this audiobook, we're diving deep, not into surface-level tips or quick-fix formulas. We're going straight into the mental war that wages inside your head every single morning. That voice that whispers when your alarm goes off. Just 5 more minutes. You've earned the rest. That cunning negotiator that appears right when you're about to start working. Maybe after 1 more video. After you check your messages. After the planets align. You know what I'm talking about. We all do. That moment when you know what the right move is, but you do the easy thing instead, the comfortable thing, the thing that keeps you exactly where you've been for the past 5 years. Through these chapters, you're going to discover why discipline has absolutely nothing to do with feelings. Why your brain actively works against your growth. And here's the part that might shock you. Why forcing yourself isn't weakness or cruelty. It's actually the highest form of self-respect you can demonstrate. You'll understand how forced action slowly transforms into genuine motivation. How tiny, disciplined choices compound into an entirely different identity. And why today's discomfort is literally the admission price for tomorrow's freedom. 1. Need to be straight with you about something. This audiobook is designed to make you uncomfortable. Not because I enjoy it, but because truth is rarely comfortable. Real transformation never happens in your comfort zone. It happens in that space where you're sweating, questioning, doubting, yet moving forward anyway. You won't find shortcuts here. There's no magical morning routine that suddenly makes everything easy. No mystical formula that erases the hard parts. What you will find is the raw, unfiltered truth that disciplined people know, but rarely talk about. Because here's the secret they've learned. Discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about being one level stronger than your excuses every single day. And here's something else you need to understand right now. The people who refuse to force themselves today, life forces them tomorrow. Through circumstances, through financial pressure, through the crushing weight of regret at 45, looking back at all the years they negotiated with themselves. So, who is this audiobook for? If you're a student burning the midnight oil, a professional feeling stuck on the same rung of the ladder, an entrepreneur fighting to build something meaningful, a creator struggling with consistency, or simply someone who knows deep in your gut that you're living at about 30% of your actual potential. This is for you. But here's my request. Don't listen to this in the background while you're doing 5 other things. Don't treat this like ambient noise while you scroll. Every sentence in this audiobook is aimed at something specific inside you. These aren't theories from someone who's never struggled. This is the voice of someone who has fought this exact battle, who has lost more rounds than won, who has learned that the difference between the person you are and the person you could be isn't talent or luck or circumstances. It's the willingness to force yourself when forcing yourself feels impossible. Let me make something crystal clear. This isn't entertainment designed to make you feel good temporarily before returning to the same patterns. This is for people who want execution, not excuses. Transformation, not just temporary motivation. If you genuinely want your mindset to become unshakable, your discipline to become unbreakable, and your ability to play the long game to become second nature, then every chapter matters. Stopping halfway is easy. Everyone does it. But listening through to the end, taking notes, actually implementing what you hear, that's the first disciplined action. The first proof to yourself that this time is different. So here's what I want you to do right now. Make a small promise to yourself. You're going to listen to this entire audiobook. You're going to eliminate distractions. And when uncomfortable truths surface, when you hear something that makes you want to skip ahead or tune out, you're going to lean in instead of pulling away. And here's why this matters so much. The battle you're fighting right now, it's not against the world. It's not against your circumstances or your past or your limitations. The battle is between 2 versions of yourself. The version that negotiates, procrastinates, and waits for perfect conditions. And the version that acts despite imperfect conditions. That shows up when it's hard. That forces movement when everything inside wants to freeze. One of these versions is going to win. And the winner will determine everything about your next decade. Now, before we dive deeper, I need you to understand something fundamental about how discipline actually works. Most people have it completely backwards. They think discipline is something you feel. Like one morning you'll wake up and suddenly have this overwhelming urge to do hard things. This burning desire to embrace discomfort. That's not how it works, at all. Discipline begins at the exact moment you stop negotiating with yourself. Think about that. Not when you feel motivated, not when circumstances are perfect, but the precise second you cut off the internal debate and simply move. Because your mind has one primary job. It's not to help you grow. It's not to push you toward your potential. Your mind's job is to keep you comfortable, safe, and in familiar territory. It's a survival mechanism that worked great when we were dodging predators on the savannah. But in modern life, that same mechanism is the enemy of growth. Every morning when your alarm sounds, your mind launches into negotiation mode. You didn't sleep well. You'll be more productive if you rest another hour. Tomorrow, you'll start fresh. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Almost logical. But here's what your mind isn't telling you. Every time you hit snooze, you're not just delaying your morning. You're training your brain that your word to yourself means nothing. That promises made yesterday can be broken today without consequence. Forcing yourself to get up despite the comfort of your bed? That's not cruelty. That's the most honest thing you can do for your future self. Because when that alarm sounds and you make the decision to rise, you're not just leaving your bed. You're stepping out of your old version. Let me paint a different picture for you. Discipline doesn't mean you enjoy pain. It doesn't mean you're some masochistic robot who thrives on suffering. Discipline means you've learned to tolerate discomfort because you can see where you're heading. You've connected today's temporary pain to tomorrow's permanent gain. Pain without direction is torture. But pain with purpose, that's training. That's transformation. That's the price of admission to the life you actually want. Every single time you tell yourself, not today, you're teaching your brain that excuses are acceptable. You're wiring in the pattern. But every time you say, whether I feel like it or not, I'm doing this, you're training your character. Building the neural pathways that separate people who achieve from people who attempt. And here's something that might surprise you. Discipline isn't some grand, heroic thing. It's boring. Discipline is the accumulation of tiny, repetitive, unglamorous decisions that nobody sees and nobody applauds. Going to the gym isn't glamorous. Reading when you could be scrolling isn't exciting. Practicing your craft when you'd rather relax isn't entertaining. But these boring actions, they're what separate you from everyone else. While others are waiting to feel inspired, you're building the foundation that inspiration can never create. People constantly ask, how do I become disciplined? But that's the wrong question. The real question is, when do I stop lying to myself? Because here's the truth. Most people already know exactly what they need to do. The problem isn't knowledge, it's execution. And execution doesn't arrive until you learn to force yourself past the resistance. Discipline doesn't mean becoming robotic or emotionless. It means learning to make principle-based decisions instead of emotion-based ones. When you force yourself, Your brain rebels initially. It floods you with feelings of fatigue, boredom, doubt. These feelings are real. But here's what most people don't understand. These feelings aren't danger signals. They're change signals. Your brain is designed for survival, not growth. When you start taking disciplined action, your brain sounds the alarm. This is uncomfortable. This is unfamiliar. This might be dangerous. But if you push through that initial resistance, something remarkable happens. A strange calm settles in. A clarity emerges. You realize the direction is now in your hands. You're not controlled, you're in control. This is the turning point where discipline stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like strength. Remember this: the world will never come knocking on your door to teach you discipline. You have two choices. Force yourself today, or let circumstances force you tomorrow. The only difference? Today's pain is voluntary. Tomorrow's pain is mandatory. Choose discipline today so life doesn't choose consequences for you tomorrow. Now, here's where things get interesting, and this is something I need you to really absorb. Your mind is not your master. Your mind is your tool. Most people live their entire lives taking orders from their thoughts. Mind feels tired? Stop. Mind feels scared? Retreat. Mind doesn't feel like it? Postpone. Gradually, unconsciously, your mind becomes the master and you become the servant. But discipline flips this relationship. Your mind can advise. It can send signals. But the final decision? That's always yours. The day you understand that not every thought requires obedience is the day you touch real self-control. Your brain's primary goal isn't growth. It's survival. It wants to keep you safe, familiar, comfortable. So whenever you attempt a disciplined action, your brain hits the panic button. It sends signals labeled as fatigue, doubt, confusion, fear. But here's the thing. These aren't danger signals. They're just change signals, growth signals. The problem? Most people accept these signals as truth and back down. Discipline means acknowledging the signals without handing them the steering wheel. Forcing yourself is actually the process of reprogramming your brain. Every time you take action despite discomfort, your brain receives new data. I did the hard thing, and I survived. Slowly, the same brain that used to resist starts to cooperate. Initially, it feels like warfare. Over time, it becomes alignment. Discipline doesn't become easy, but it does become familiar. Here's a huge mistake people make. They think discipline means suppressing emotions. But the truth is, discipline teaches you to manage emotions, not eliminate them. Fear will still show up. Boredom will still arrive. Laziness will knock on your door. But discipline gives you the skill to move forward despite these visitors. Real emotional maturity isn't about what you feel. It's about what you do, regardless of what you feel. When you learn to use your mind as a tool rather than follow it as a master, decisions become simpler. They're no longer based on moods. They're based on rules, standards you set in advance. You stop debating with yourself every single day. You simply follow your predetermined standards. These standards slowly become your identity. And when identity shifts, discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes your default setting. Let me be blunt about something. Your mind will always offer you comfort, but comfort never moves you forward. Growth requires discomfort, and discomfort requires discipline. When you transform your mind from master to tool, that's when you truly take control of your life's direction. But here's the part that might make you uncomfortable. The part we need to address head-on, because it's the gap that destroys most people's potential. The gap between who you are right now and who you want to become. And the bridge across that gap? It's not motivation. It's not inspiration. It's not positive thinking or vision boards or affirmations. The bridge is forced action. The biggest gap in life isn't motivation. It's not even clarity. The biggest gap is action. People know what they need to do. They know why they need to do it. They know when they should do it. Yet they don't do it. Why? Simple. They've linked action to feeling. They believe that when they feel that internal push, that surge of energy, then they'll move. But disciplined people do it backwards. They move first. Then they allow the feeling to follow. Forced action isn't weakness. It's a powerful decision made for the future version of you that doesn't exist yet, but could exist. When you force yourself, you send your brain a clear message. I operate on commitment, not conditions. This message, repeated through action, becomes belief. Initially, every forced step feels heavy, like your feet are sinking into mud. But when those same steps happen daily, they carve a path. Action through consistency creates confidence, and confidence fuels more action. It's a loop. And forced action is the entry point. People often ask, how can I do it if I don't feel like it? Wrong question. The right question is, if something is necessary, what role should feeling play? Discipline teaches that feeling isn't the driver. It's just a passenger. You know the destination. The steering wheel is in your hands. Your feelings might complain from the back seat. They'll get tired. They'll make excuses. But whether the car stops or continues, that's your decision. Every forced action is a vote for the identity you want to build. Today's study session? A vote for focused learner. Today's workout? A vote for strong person. Today's practice? A vote for professional. One vote changes nothing, but accumulated votes create identity. And when identity becomes clear, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes alignment. Most people want results fast, so they delay action. But the reward of forced action isn't immediate results. It's internal shift. You start trusting yourself. Promises you make to yourself get kept. self-trust builds, and there's no motivation more powerful than self-trust. Once you see that you can act without feeling like it, excuses lose their power. Remember this: perfect conditions will never arrive. Right mood, right timing, right energy. These are all stories your mind creates. Forced action shatters these stories. It plants you firmly in the present moment and says, move now, start now, commit now. Because the people who force themselves today, they're the ones who choose their circumstances tomorrow. Now, here's something that most motivation speakers won't tell you, something that's absolutely critical for you to understand before we go any deeper. Discipline is built in. The boring, repetitive moments, not in the dramatic ones. Most people associate discipline with some big, emotional decision, a powerful New Year's resolution, an intense turning point, a dramatic promise made in a moment of inspiration. But that's not where real discipline lives. Real discipline is built in silence, in the moments when nobody's watching, when there's no applause, when the work is boring and repetitive and feels completely meaningless. This is where character forms, because easy work, anyone can do easy work, but boring work, only someone who understands the long game does boring work. Doing the same thing every single day, following the same routine, maintaining consistency without excitement. This is real discipline. Your mind craves novelty. It wants new, interesting, stimulating. But growth comes from repetition. When you do the necessary work daily, skills sharpen, focus deepens, resistance weakens. The boring-looking action is actually the one that compounds, and compound effects are always silent. This is where forcing yourself matters most, because there's no external push here. No fear, no deadline, no pressure, just you and the work. This is the stage where most people fall, because boredom doesn't hurt, but it does steal direction. Discipline teaches that you don't run from boredom, you move through it. When you sit with boredom, work through it anyway, you learn attention control. People often think discipline means living a harsh, restricted life. But discipline actually simplifies life. When your routine is fixed, decisions decrease. You're not debating with yourself daily about what to do. You already know. This simplicity saves mental energy, and that saved energy goes into important things. Discipline reduces chaos, increases clarity. In these boring moments, identity is silently shaped. There's no dramatic announcement, no instant reward, but every repeated action changes you slightly. One day you look back and realize discipline isn't something you do anymore. It's who you are. And this is where we're about to turn a corner in this audiobook. Because what comes next is the part that separates people who understand discipline from people who master it. The part that explains why some people transform their entire lives while others remain stuck in the same patterns for decades. But before we get there, I need you to really sit with what we've covered. Because if you're still waiting for motivation to strike, if you're still negotiating with yourself every morning, if you're still believing that one day the perfect conditions will arrive and everything will suddenly become easy, then you haven't truly heard what I've been saying. And what's coming in the next chapter will be completely wasted on you, because we're about to go deeper into the psychology behind why your brain actively sabotages your growth, and more importantly, how to override it. So here's what I want you to do before we continue. Pause for a moment. Think about the last week. How many times did you negotiate with yourself? How many times did you know what you should do, but chose comfort instead? How many micro decisions did you make that moved you backward instead of forward? Don't judge yourself, just notice, because awareness is the first step toward change. And what you're about to learn in Chapter 2 will only work if you're brutally honest about where you actually are right now. Not where you wish you were, not where you pretend to be, where you actually are. And I'm warning you now, Chapter 2 is going to challenge everything you think you know about willpower, motivation, and self-control. It's going to reveal why traditional advice about discipline fails most people. And it's going to give you a framework that actually works. But only if you're ready to face some uncomfortable truths about yourself. So, take a breath, get comfortable, and when you're ready, let's dive into the real mechanics of forcing yourself for discipline. Because what we've covered so far, that's just the foundation. The real transformation starts now. Chapter 2. Your brain is your biggest enemy, and how to win the war. Welcome back. If you made it through Chapter 1, you've already proven something important. You're different from the majority who start things but never finish them. You're here because something inside you knows that mediocrity isn't your destiny, that settling isn't an option, that there's a version of you waiting to emerge, and the only thing blocking it is the patterns you keep repeating. But here's what nobody prepared you for. The biggest obstacle to your transformation isn't lack of resources, or time, or opportunity. It's the 3-pound organ sitting between your ears. Your brain is actively working against your growth, and until you understand why, you'll keep losing battles you should be winning. Let me start with something that might shock you. Your brain doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't care about your dreams or your potential or that vision board you made last January. Your brain has one priority, and one priority only: keeping you alive. And in its ancient programming, alive means safe, familiar, and unchanged. This is the fundamental conflict nobody talks about. You want growth. Your brain wants survival. You want to expand. Your brain wants to conserve energy. You want to become someone new. Your brain wants you to stay exactly who you've always been, because that version has kept you breathing this long. Think about it. Every time you decide to wake up early, start that project, have that difficult conversation, or push past your comfort zone, what happens? Your brain launches a full-scale assault. Suddenly, you're exhausted. Suddenly, you remember 17 other things that need doing. Suddenly, doubt floods in about whether this is even the right path. This isn't random. This is your brain doing its job. It's trying to protect you from what it perceives as danger. And change, to your ancient brain, registers as potential danger. Because change means unknown. Unknown means unpredictable. Unpredictable means potentially life-threatening. Here's the part that makes this so insidious. Your brain doesn't attack you with obvious lies. It's far more sophisticated than that. It attacks you with logic, with reasonable-sounding arguments, with what feels like genuine concern for your well-being. You didn't sleep well last night. Rest is important for productivity. You'll work better after you recover. Sounds sensible, doesn't it? This isn't the right time to start. Wait until things settle down. Logical, right? You're not qualified enough yet. Do more research first. Prudent advice, it seems. But here's what's really happening. Your brain is running a protection program designed for a world that no longer exists. A world where uncertainty could mean death, where conserving energy meant survival, where sticking with the tribe was the only way to stay safe. This programming worked brilliantly 10,000 years ago. Today, it's the very thing destroying your potential. So how do you win against an adversary this powerful? An adversary that controls your thoughts, emotions, and energy levels? The answer isn't what you've been told. Traditional advice about motivation and willpower completely misunderstands how this battle actually works. Let me destroy some myths you've probably believed your whole life. First myth: willpower is like a muscle. Work it hard and it gets stronger. This sounds empowering, but it's dangerously incomplete. Yes, willpower can be trained, but here's what they don't tell you. Willpower is also a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every impulse you control, it all draws from the same tank. By evening, that tank is nearly empty. This is why you can resist dessert at lunch, but devour an entire bag of chips at night. Why you can focus on important work in the morning, but fall into endless scrolling by evening. Why you start each day with strong intentions, but end it wondering where all your discipline went. Understanding this changes everything. It means discipline isn't about white-knuckling your way through constant resistance all day long. That's a war of attrition you'll eventually lose. Real discipline is about structuring your life so you're not relying on willpower for every single decision. Second myth: motivation comes first, action follows. This is backwards, and it's keeping you stuck. Motivation is an emotion. Emotions are inconsistent, unpredictable, and temporary. If you wait for motivation before acting, you're essentially giving your emotions control over your destiny. You're making your future dependent on your feelings. And your feelings change with the weather, your sleep quality, what you ate for breakfast, or a random comment someone made yesterday. Here's the truth that disciplined people have learned. Action comes first. Motivation follows. Movement creates momentum. Momentum generates motivation. So when you don't feel like doing something, that's not a sign to stop. That's actually when forcing yourself matters most. Because you're breaking the pattern. You're proving to your brain that feelings don't dictate behavior. Third myth: discipline means having an iron will and never struggling. This myth is particularly destructive because it makes people think they're broken when discipline feels hard. Listen carefully.
Discipline is supposed to feel hard. That's not a bug in the system. That's the entire point. The difficulty is where growth happens. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it and it wouldn't create any competitive advantage. The people you admire who seem naturally disciplined, they're not operating in some magical zone where everything is effortless. They're fighting the same battles you are. The difference is they've learned to take action despite the resistance, not in the absence of resistance. They've stopped waiting for it to feel easy and
accepted that significant things always require pushing through discomfort. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. Your brain doesn't just resist change through feelings. It's far more strategic than that. It uses 3 primary weapons, and once you recognize them, you can defend against them. Weapon 1: the comfort trap. Your brain is a genius at reframing laziness as self-care. You've been working so hard lately, you deserve a break. Rest is productive too. You need to recharge. Pushing yourself when you're tired will lead to burnout. Notice how every excuse sounds like wisdom, like you're actually being mature and balanced by choosing comfort. Here's the test. Is this truly rest that rejuvenates you? Or is it avoidance dressed up as self-care? Real rest is intentional, guilt-free, and leaves you energized. Avoidance is accompanied by that gnawing feeling that you're letting yourself down, and it leaves you more drained than before because you're carrying the weight of disappointment in yourself. Weapon 2: the perfection paralysis. Your brain loves this one because it sounds so reasonable. Don't start until you have the perfect plan, the perfect setup, the perfect conditions, the perfect level of knowledge. It convinces you that preparation is productive, that planning is progress, that research is taking action. But here's what's really happening. You're stuck in an endless loop of preparing to prepare. Because here's the secret about perfect conditions. They don't exist. There will always be something that's not quite right, something you haven't learned yet, some reason why now isn't the ideal time. Perfection paralysis is just fear wearing a sophisticated disguise. The antidote? Start messy. Start incomplete. Start with what you have right now from exactly where you are. Because action, even imperfect action, teaches you things that preparation never can. You learn more from 1 hour of messy doing than from 10 hours of perfect planning. Weapon 3: the comparison curse. Your brain shows you everyone else's highlight reel and compares it to your behind-the-scenes footage. Someone's already way ahead. Someone's achieving it faster. Someone seems to have it all figured out while you're still struggling with basics. So what's the point of even trying? This weapon is particularly cruel because it uses reality against you. Yes, someone is further ahead. That's always going to be true. But here's what your brain conveniently ignores. Someone is also further behind. Someone is looking at you and thinking the same thing. And more importantly, their journey is completely irrelevant to yours. The only comparison that matters is who you were yesterday versus who you are today. That's it. Everyone else is playing a different game with different rules, different starting points, and different definitions of success. Stop measuring your Chapter 1 against someone else's Chapter 20. Now, understanding these weapons is crucial, but it's not enough. Because knowledge without application is just interesting information. So let's talk about the counter strategy. How do you actually win this war against your brain? The first principle is something I call strategic automation. Remember how we talked about willpower being a finite resource? The solution isn't to try to build infinite willpower. That's impossible. The solution is to remove decisions altogether. Every choice point is an opportunity for your brain to talk you out of something. So, eliminate the choice points. Don't decide whether to work out each morning. Decide once that you work out every morning, then remove the daily decision. Don't debate whether to write today. Write at the same time every day until it's just what you do at that time. Don't negotiate whether to eat healthy. Create systems that make unhealthy options require active decisions, while healthy options are automatic. This is why successful people seem to have boring routines. It's not that they lack creativity or spontaneity. It's that they've automated the important things so they don't waste mental energy on recurring decisions. Every decision you can automate is willpower you can allocate to things that actually require it. The second principle is environmental design. Your environment is constantly shaping your behavior, whether you're aware of it or not. Most people try to change themselves while leaving their environment unchanged. That's like trying to become a better swimmer while staying in shallow water. Your willpower can't consistently override your environment. Make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard. Want to read more? Put books everywhere and hide your phone. Want to eat better? Don't test your willpower at the grocery store. Don't keep junk food in your house and rely on discipline to resist it. That's a losing strategy. Instead, make the decision once at the store, then your environment does the discipline for you at home. Want to focus on deep work? Don't rely on willpower to ignore distractions. Eliminate the distractions. No phone in the room. No internet connection. No escape routes. Your future self will thank you for making the hard choice in advance, rather than requiring constant heroic effort in the moment. The third principle is what I call identity-first decision-making. And this is where everything we've talked about so far comes together. This is the key that unlocks sustainable transformation. But before I explain it, I need you to understand something fundamental about how change actually works. Most people try to change their behavior directly. They set goals. They make plans. They rely on motivation and discipline, and sometimes it works for a while. But then life gets stressful, or they get tired, or something unexpected happens, and they snap back to their old patterns, like a rubber band that was stretched too far. Why does this happen? Because they never changed who they believe they are. They're trying to act like a different person while still identifying as their old self. That creates constant internal tension. It's exhausting. It requires perpetual effort, and eventually the old identity wins because it's the path of least resistance. Here's the shift that changes everything. Instead of trying to achieve certain outcomes, Focus on becoming a certain type of person. Don't try to force yourself to read because you think you should. Become someone who reads. Don't discipline yourself to work out because it's healthy. Become someone who trains their body. Don't push yourself to create because you have goals. Become a creator. This might sound like semantic wordplay, but it's actually a fundamental rewiring of how you operate. When reading is something you do, you need constant discipline to maintain it. When reading is who you are, not doing it feels wrong. It's a violation of your identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. This is crucial. Each disciplined choice isn't just about the immediate outcome. It's evidence of your identity. When you work out despite not feeling like it, you're not just exercising, you're casting a vote for, I am someone who honors commitments to myself. When you sit down to work when you'd rather scroll, you're voting for, I am someone who does what matters, not what's easy. These votes accumulate. One vote doesn't change an election, but hundreds of votes, thousands of votes, that's how you become someone new. That's how discipline stops being something you force and starts being something you are. But here's the part most people miss. You don't need to win every vote. You don't need perfect consistency. You just need to win more than you lose, because your brain is keeping score. When you win more often than you lose, your self-concept begins to shift. You start to see yourself as a disciplined person who occasionally slips, rather than an undisciplined person who occasionally does well. That shift in self-concept is everything. Because once you believe you're a disciplined person, your brain starts working for you instead of against you. Acting with discipline becomes the path of least resistance because it aligns with your identity. Undisciplined behavior starts feeling uncomfortable because it contradicts who you believe you are. This is why forced action is so powerful. Every time you force yourself, despite resistance, you're not just accomplishing a task, you're building evidence for a new identity. You're proving to yourself that you're the type of person who follows through, who keeps promises, who does hard things. And here's something fascinating. Your brain can't distinguish between real motivation and forced action when it's building your self-concept. It just sees behavior. So even when you're gritting your teeth and pushing through, your brain is recording, I did the thing. That becomes data that shapes how you see yourself. This is the secret weapon against all of your brain's resistance tactics. When you understand that every action is identity construction, forcing yourself becomes less about achieving outcomes and more about becoming someone. The outcome is just a byproduct. The real prize is the person you're building. Now, I need to address something important before we go further. Some of you might be thinking this sounds exhausting, like you're going to be in a constant battle with yourself forever, white-knuckling your way through life, forcing yourself to do things you hate, never experiencing genuine enjoyment or ease. That's not what this is. Let me be clear. Initially, yes, forcing yourself feels difficult. There is a period of active resistance where your brain fights every new pattern. But something remarkable happens when you push through this phase. The resistance doesn't just decrease, it eventually reverses. The same activities that once required massive willpower start feeling natural. Then they start feeling good. Eventually, they become something you look forward to. This isn't magical thinking. This is documented neuroscience. Your brain adapts. It creates new neural pathways. It recalibrates its definition of normal. What was once uncomfortable becomes your new baseline. But you never get to that point if you keep waiting for it to feel good before you start. You have to force yourself through the resistance phase to reach the adaptation phase. Most people quit during resistance because they think it will always feel this hard. But it won't. You just have to prove it to yourself by pushing through. Think about anything you do effortlessly now that was once difficult. Walking, talking, reading, driving. The first time you tried, it felt impossible. Your brain had to consciously control every aspect. It was exhausting, but you kept doing it anyway. And gradually, it became automatic, effortless, second nature. Discipline works the same way. The actions that require enormous effort today will become your default setting tomorrow. But only if you do them consistently enough for your brain to rewire around them. Only if you force yourself through the difficult phase instead of quitting when it gets hard. This is why the question isn't, how do I make discipline easy? The question is, how do I persist through discipline being hard long enough for it to become easy? And the answer we've been building toward is this. By understanding that every difficult repetition is rewiring your brain, reshaping your identity, and moving you closer to the version of yourself where discipline is default. You're not forcing yourself for the outcome. You're forcing yourself for the identity. And once the identity shifts, the outcomes become inevitable. Now here's where we need to go deeper. Because understanding all this intellectually is one thing. Actually implementing it when your alarm goes off, when work feels overwhelming, when motivation has completely evaporated, that's entirely different. And that's exactly what we're going to tackle in the next chapter. Because I'm about to show you the exact framework that transforms understanding into action. The specific tactics that make forcing yourself systematic rather than sporadic. The daily practices that build unbreakable discipline, not through willpower, but through architecture. But before we get there, I need you to do something. Stop listening for just a moment. Think about your current identity. Not who you want to be, who you currently believe you are. Be honest. Are you someone who starts things but doesn't finish? Someone who has potential but doesn't execute? Someone who knows what to do but doesn't do it? Don't judge it. Just see it clearly. Because you can't change an identity you haven't acknowledged. And what's coming in Chapter 3 only works if you're willing to admit where you actually are right now. Not where you were. Not where you're going to be. Where you are right now, today, in this moment. Because I'm about to give you a system that can transform your life. But it requires brutal honesty as the starting point. It requires you to stop lying to yourself about why you're not where you want to be. It requires you to take full ownership of the fact that your current results are a direct reflection of your current identity and behaviors. Can you do that? Can you look at your life without excuses or blame or victim stories? Because if you can, what comes next will change everything. But if you're still clinging to comfortable lies about why things aren't your fault, you might as well stop here. Because the next chapter isn't gentle. It's a mirror. And mirrors show you exactly what's there, not what you wish was there. So take a breath. Get brutally honest with yourself. And when you're ready to face the truth without flinching, we'll dive into the practical framework that turns everything we've discussed into a daily system. A system that doesn't rely on motivation, doesn't depend on perfect conditions, doesn't require you to be someone you're not. A system that meets you exactly where you are and builds from there. One forced action at a time. One identity vote at a time. One day at a time. Until forcing yourself is no longer forced. Until discipline is no longer difficult. Until the person you're becoming is simply who you are. That's where we're headed. But you have to be willing to start from the truth. So I'll ask you one more time. Are you ready to be honest about where you are? Because chapter 3 is where theory becomes practice. Where understanding becomes transformation, where everything changes. But only if you're ready to force yourself past one more barrier, the barrier of comfortable self-deception, the barrier of blaming circumstances, the barrier of believing you're special in your struggles, and somehow exempt from the rules that govern everyone else. Strip away those barriers. Stand naked in front of the truth. And then we'll build something extraordinary. See you in Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Daily Architecture of Discipline. So you're still here. That tells me something important. You're not just looking for quick tips or surface-level motivation. You're ready to do the real work, the uncomfortable work, the work that requires looking at yourself without the protective filter of excuses and justifications you've been using for years. Good, because what we're about to build together requires that level of honesty. This chapter is where everything becomes practical, where philosophy becomes framework, where understanding becomes a daily system that actually works. But first, we need to establish something crucial, a foundation that most people skip because it's uncomfortable. You need to audit your current reality with surgical precision. Not the reality you present to others, not the reality you tell yourself when you're feeling optimistic, the actual, unglamorous, sometimes embarrassing reality of how you're really spending your days. Because you can't build a new structure on a foundation of lies. So let's do this together, right now. I want you to think about yesterday, not last week, not your best day last month. Yesterday. The most recent complete day you've lived. What time did you actually wake up? Not when your alarm went off. When did you actually get out of bed and start your day? How much time did you spend scrolling before you even left your room? What did you eat? Not what you planned to eat or what you usually eat. What actually went into your body? How much water? How much caffeine? How much processed sugar masquerading as energy? Be specific. Be honest. This isn't about judgment. It's about data. How many hours did you spend on genuine, focused work? Not time at your desk with multiple tabs open. Not time with your textbook in front of you while your mind wandered. Actual, focused work, where you were fully present and engaged. For most people, the real number is shockingly low. Maybe 2 hours, maybe less. Even on what they'd consider a productive day. How much time did you spend on social media? Not what your phone reports, because you'll rationalize that somehow. How much time did you spend consuming other people's content instead of creating your own? How many times did you check your phone? How many times did you reach for it without even knowing why? What promises did you make to yourself that you broke? Maybe you said you'd work out. Didn't happen. Maybe you said you'd study for 3 hours. You studied for 30 minutes and called it enough. Maybe you said you wouldn't eat junk food, but then stress hit and suddenly you're elbow deep in a bag of chips, convincing yourself it doesn't count. Here's what I'm doing right now. I'm holding up a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They don't soften the image to protect your feelings. They show you exactly what's there. Some of you are squirming right now. Good. That discomfort is the starting point of change, because you can't fix what you won't acknowledge. Most people live in a fog of vague intentions and selective memory. They remember the good days and forget the average ones. They count the hours they were present at their desk, not the hours they were actually working. They believe their own highlight reel and wonder why their results don't match their self-image. This ends now. For the next 7 days, you're going to track everything. And I mean everything. Not because I want you to become obsessive, but because you need to see the truth. You need hard data about where your time actually goes, where your energy actually flows, what you actually do versus what you think you do. Wake time, sleep time, hours of focused work, hours of distraction, exercise, nutrition, social media, everything. Write it down every single day. No cheating, no rounding up, no giving yourself credit for intentions that didn't become actions. Just raw, unfiltered truth. Why 7 days? Because 1 day is an anomaly. 7 days is pattern, and patterns don't lie. Your patterns right now are creating your results. If you don't like your results, you need to see your patterns clearly before you can change them. Most people never do this. They stay blind to their own behaviors and then wonder why nothing changes year after year. Now, once you have that data, we're going to do something with it. We're going to build what I call your discipline architecture. This isn't a motivation system. It's not dependent on how you feel. It's a structural framework that makes discipline the path of least resistance. Let me explain how this works. Your life right now has an architecture, a structure. Most people didn't consciously design it. It just accumulated over years of taking the path of least resistance. Your environment, your routines, your defaults, they're all architected right now. The problem is they're architected for comfort, not growth. For easy, not important. For temporary satisfaction, not long-term transformation. We're going to redesign the architecture. Not all at once, because that's overwhelming and unsustainable. We're going to do it systematically, one component at a time, building a structure that makes disciplined behavior automatic. Here's how. Component 1. The morning anchor. Everything starts here. How you begin your day determines everything that follows. Right now, most people begin their day in reactive mode. Alarm goes off, hit snooze, eventually drag yourself up, immediately check phone. Start responding to other people's priorities before you've even defined your own. You're already behind before the day begins. We're changing that. Your new morning architecture starts the night before. Decide your wake time. Set one alarm. Put your phone across the room so you have to physically get out of bed to turn it off. Once you're up, you're up. No negotiation, no just 5 more minutes. That negotiation is where you lose the day. Here's what most people don't understand about that snooze button. It's not just about sleep. It's about the first promise you make to yourself each day. When you set an alarm, you're making a promise to your future self. At this time, we're getting up. When you hit snooze, you're teaching yourself that your word means nothing. That promises to yourself are optional. That comfort trumps commitment. Do that enough times and you'll wonder why you can't stick to anything. You're training yourself in weakness every single morning. The morning anchor isn't about waking up early. It's about keeping your word to yourself. That's where self-trust is built, one morning at a time. Once you're up, the next 60 minutes are sacred. No phone, no email, no news, no social media. Nothing that puts you in reactive mode. This first hour belongs to you. You get to decide what goes into your mind before the world makes its demands. This is non-negotiable. What you do in this hour is up to you, but it should include at least 3 things. Movement. Even if it's just stretching or a short walk, something that tells your body we're awake and engaged. Stillness. Even just 5 minutes of sitting quietly, breathing, centering yourself. Doesn't have to be formal meditation, just stillness. And creation. Spending time on something that matters to you. Writing, reading, learning, planning, creating before consuming. This morning anchor does something powerful. It proves to yourself that you're in control, that you can override impulses and defaults, that discipline is possible. And it sets the tone for every decision that follows. When you win the morning, you're more likely to win the day. Component 2. The work block. This is where most people completely fail at architecture. They say they're going to work or be productive, but they never define what that actually means. They sit at their desk with good intentions, but their environment is full of escape routes. Phone buzzing, email dinging, tabs open to, distracting sights, background noise pulling attention. Then they wonder why they can't focus. Here's the rule. When you're in a work block, there is only work. No multitasking, no quick checks. No, I'll just respond to this one thing. Work blocks are sacred territory. You decide in advance what you're working on. You eliminate every possible distraction. Phone off or in another room. Internet blocked if you don't need it. Email closed. Nothing exists except you and the work. Start with just one 90-minute block per day. That's it. One block where you do nothing but work on the one most important thing. Not the urgent thing, not the easy thing, the important thing. The thing that actually moves you forward. 90 minutes of pure focus will create more value than 8 hours of distracted dabbling. Why 90 minutes? Because that's roughly how long most people can maintain genuine focus before needing a real break. Not a check your phone break, an actual reset. Stand up. Move. Step outside. Completely disconnect. Then, if you're doing another block, come back fresh. Most people never experience real focus because they never give themselves the environment to achieve it. They're constantly context switching, constantly available, constantly distracted. Then they blame themselves for lack of willpower. It's not willpower, it's architecture. Your environment is set up to distract you. Change the environment and discipline becomes easier. Component 3. The energy system. You cannot build discipline on a foundation of exhaustion. This is something people constantly miss. They try to force themselves while running on fumes and wonder why it's so hard. Your body needs fuel. Your brain needs rest. Your nervous system needs regulation. Ignore this and you're fighting discipline on hard mode. Sleep is non-negotiable. You need 7 to 8 hours. I'll sleep when I'm dead is the stupidest productivity advice ever given. Sleep deprivation makes you less focused, less creative, more impulsive, and more emotional. You're literally making yourself dumber and weaker by cutting sleep. Yet people wear it like a badge of honor. Stop it. Nutrition matters more than you think. Your brain runs on glucose. Feed it processed garbage, and it performs like garbage. I'm not saying you need a perfect diet. I'm saying you need to stop undermining your discipline with energy crashes caused by terrible food choices. Stable energy comes from whole foods, adequate protein, and consistent meal timing. It's not sexy, but it works. Movement is mandatory. Not because you need to look a certain way, because your body is designed to move. And when it doesn't, everything suffers. Energy, mood, focus, sleep quality, stress management, all of it. You don't need to become an athlete. You need to move your body regularly. Walk, lift, stretch, anything that breaks sedentary patterns. Here's what people don't realize. When you're exhausted, undernourished, and sedentary, forcing yourself requires massive willpower because you're fighting your body's basic needs. When you're rested, fed, and moving, discipline becomes easier because you're working with your biology instead of against it. Component 4. The decision filter. Every day you face hundreds of decisions. Each one is an opportunity to either reinforce or undermine your discipline. Most people make these decisions emotionally, impulsively, based on immediate feelings. We're going to change that. You're going to develop a filter, a set of questions you ask before making any significant decision. Question 1. Does this align with who I'm becoming? Not who I am now, who I'm becoming. Remember, every action is a vote for your identity. Is this action voting for the person you want to be or the person you're trying to leave behind? Question 2. Will my future self thank me for this? Not tomorrow. Your future self 6 months from now, 1 year from now. Will that version of you look back at this decision with gratitude or regret? Question 3. Am I choosing this because it's right or because it's easy? Be honest. Easy isn't always wrong. But if you're consistently choosing easy over right, you're building the wrong life. These 3 questions become your filter. Use them for everything, whether to wake up or sleep in, whether to do the work or scroll, whether to have the difficult conversation or avoid it, whether to eat the food that fuels you or the food that comforts you. Filter every decision through identity, future impact, and motivation. At first, you'll have to consciously apply this filter. It will feel mechanical, unnatural. That's fine. Over time, it becomes automatic. Your brain starts running these questions in the background. Decision-making becomes faster because you've defined your criteria. You're not debating each choice from scratch. You're simply applying your established filter. Component 5. The accountability mirror. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable but powerful component. Every evening before you go to sleep, you're going to review your day, not vaguely, specifically. You're going to ask yourself 4 questions and write down the answers. Write, not just think. Writing forces honesty. Question 1. What promises did I keep to myself today? List them. Be specific. This is your proof that you're trustworthy, that your word to yourself means something. Question 2. What promises did I break? No sugarcoating, no excuses, just facts. I said I would do this. I didn't do it. Why? What was the real reason? Not the comfortable lie, the real reason. Question 3. What did I learn about myself today? Every day teaches you something if you're paying attention. Maybe you learned what time of day you focus best. Maybe you learned which environments drain you. Maybe you learned what triggers send you into avoidance. Write it down. Question 4. What is one thing I will do differently tomorrow? Not 10 things, 1 thing. Small, specific, achievable. This is how you iterate, how you improve, one adjustment at a time. This accountability mirror is brutal. It's supposed to be, because growth doesn't come from comfort and positive affirmations. It comes from honest assessment and continuous adjustment. Most people never improve because they never honestly evaluate. They just repeat the same patterns and hope for different results. The mirror shows you patterns you'd rather not see, the excuses you use repeatedly, the areas where you consistently fail, the gap between who you say you are and who you actually are. This information is gold, because once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Now, here's where this all comes together. These 5 components create an architecture that makes discipline systematic rather than heroic. You're not relying on willpower to force yourself in every moment. You've designed your day so that disciplined behavior is the default, the path of least resistance. Morning anchor means you start strong. Work blocks mean you have protected time for important work. Energy system means you have the fuel to show up. Decision filter means you make better choices automatically. Accountability mirror means you learn and adjust continuously. This is a system, not a sporadic effort. But here's what I need you to understand. This system isn't magic. It doesn't eliminate resistance. It doesn't make hard things easy. What it does is make hard things systematic, repeatable, sustainable. You're not white-knuckling your world way through chaos. You're following a structure that guides you even when motivation is gone. The first week will still be hard. Your brain will resist. You'll want to quit. You'll find reasons why this won't work for you, why your situation is different, why you need to modify it before you even try it. That's just resistance. That's your brain protecting the status quo. Expect it. Don't obey it. Week 2 gets slightly easier. Not because the actions are easier, but because you have proof. You made it through week 1. You have data showing you can do this. That proof matters more than motivation ever could. Proof builds belief. Belief reduces resistance. By week 3, something shifts. The architecture starts to feel normal. Not effortless, but familiar. You stop debating whether to follow the system. You just follow it. This is where identity starts to change. You're becoming someone who has a system and follows it. That's a different person than who you were a month ago. Month 2 is where magic happens. Not motivation magic, identity magic. You start to see yourself differently. You start to trust yourself. Promises you make get kept. When you say you'll do something, you believe yourself because you have evidence. Self-trust is the most powerful form of motivation that exists. But let me warn you about something. You will have bad days. Days where you don't follow the system, where you break promises, where you fall back into old patterns. This is normal, expected. The question isn't whether you'll have bad days, it's what you do the next day. Most people have one bad day and use it as evidence that they're broken, that the system doesn't work, that discipline isn't for them. Then they quit. They go back to zero. They waste all the momentum they built. This is the critical mistake that keeps people stuck forever. Here's the truth. One bad day means nothing. It's just data. Information about what circumstances triggered old patterns. What you do the next morning determines everything. Do you use the bad day as an excuse to spiral? Or do you treat it as a temporary deviation and get right back to the system. Disciplined people aren't people who never fail. They're people who fail and come back faster. They don't need perfect streaks. They just need to win more than they lose. They understand that progress isn't linear. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But as long as the general direction is forward, you're winning. This is where most self-help advice fails you. It presents discipline as this all-or-nothing thing. You're either disciplined or you're not. You either keep your streak or you're back to zero. That's not how humans work. That's not how lasting change happens. Lasting change comes from systems that account for failure, that build in resilience, that teach you to restart rather than quit. Your job isn't to be perfect. Your job is to build a system you can return to, a North Star you can navigate by, even when you drift off course. Because you will drift. Everyone does. The difference between people who transform their lives and people who stay stuck isn't that transformers never drift. It's that they drift less far and return faster. So as you build your discipline architecture, build in grace. Build in flexibility for being human. Build in the understanding that some days will be amazing and some will be terrible, and most will be somewhere in between. That's life. That's the reality of sustainable change. What matters is the trend over time. Are you generally moving in the right direction? Are your good days outnumbering your bad days? Is the person you're becoming more aligned with who you want to be? If yes, you're succeeding, even if it doesn't feel like it in any given moment. Now, before we move to the next chapter, I need to prepare you for something. Everything we've built so far gives you the structure, the daily system, the practical framework. But there's a deeper layer we haven't touched yet. A layer that determines whether this system becomes permanent or just another thing you tried and abandoned. That layer is about the relationship between habits and identity, about how small actions compound into massive transformation, about how you go from forcing yourself to follow a system to being someone who doesn't need to force anymore because discipline has become who you are. Chapter 4 is where we go deeper than almost any discipline content ever goes, into the neuroscience of habit formation, into the psychology of identity transformation, into the specific mechanisms that turn temporary behavior change into permanent identity shift. This is where everything locks into place. But you need to have your architecture built first. You need to have spent at least a week tracking your reality, starting your morning anchor, protecting your work blocks, managing your energy, filtering decisions, reviewing with the accountability mirror. Because what comes next only makes sense when you've actually felt the resistance of building new patterns. So here's your homework before Chapter 4. Implement this system. Not perfectly, just implement it. Track your week. See what happens. Notice where you succeed. Notice where you struggle. Gather data about yourself. Because the insights in the next chapter will be personalized by your own experience. 1 week. That's all I'm asking. 7 days of actually doing this instead of just understanding it. 7 days of following the architecture. 7 days of being honest with yourself about the results. Can you do that? Will you do that? Because Chapter 4 is where temporary discipline becomes permanent identity. Where the person you're forcing yourself to be becomes the person you simply are. Where struggle transforms into flow, but only if you've done the work to get there. So take a breath, review the 5 components: morning anchor, work blocks, energy system, decision filter, accountability mirror. Write them down, plan your week, and then execute. Not perfectly, just consistently, just honestly. And when you've lived this system for 7 days, when you have real data about what it feels like to architect your discipline rather than depend on motivation, come back. Come back for Chapter 4, where everything we've built becomes permanent, where you transform from someone who does disciplined things to someone who is disciplined. That's where we're going. But the journey there requires you to move from understanding to action, from theory to practice, from nodding along to actually implementing. So go. Build your architecture. Live it for a week, and then we'll take it to the next level. See you in Chapter 4. Chapter 4. From Force to Flow, the Identity Revolution. Welcome back. If you actually did the homework from Chapter 3, if you spent 7 days tracking your reality and implementing the architecture, then you already know something important. You know what it feels like to follow through. You know the difference between understanding discipline intellectually and living it practically. You have data, experience, evidence that you can do hard things. If you skipped ahead without doing the work, go back. Seriously. What we're about to explore will make 0 sense without the lived experience of forcing yourself consistently. This isn't theory anymore. This is the deep mechanics of transformation. And mechanics only make sense when you've felt the machine running. Assuming you've done the work, let's talk about what happened during your week. You probably noticed something interesting. Some days felt harder than others. Some actions required massive effort, while others felt almost automatic. You probably succeeded in some areas and struggled in others. And you might have noticed something strange. The things that were hardest on day 1 weren't necessarily the hardest by day 7. That's not random. That's your brain adapting. That's neural pathways being formed. That's the beginning of habit formation. And understanding how this process actually works at the neuroscience level is what separates people who temporarily change from people who permanently transform. But before we dive into the science, I need to address something important. Something that might save you years of frustration. There's a common belief that habits take 21 days to form, or 30 days, or 66 days. You've probably heard these numbers. They're all wrong. Or more accurately, they're dangerously oversimplified. Habits don't form on a timeline. They form through repetition, but not just any repetition. They form through consistent repetition in specific contexts with sufficient emotional weight. Some habits form in days, others take months. The timeline isn't what matters. What matters is understanding the actual mechanics of how behaviors become automatic, and more importantly, how those behaviors reshape who you believe you are. Here's what's actually happening in your brain when you force yourself to take disciplined action. Every time you override your default response and choose the harder path, you're creating a neural connection. Think of it like this. Your brain is a dense forest. Your current behaviors are well-worn paths through that forest. Wide, clear, easy to walk. They're the default routes you take without thinking. When you start a new behavior, you're forging a new path through thick undergrowth. It's difficult. It requires conscious effort. You have to hack through brush with every step. This is why new behaviors feel so hard. You're literally building infrastructure in your brain that doesn't exist yet. But here's what's remarkable. Every time you walk that new path, it gets slightly easier. The brush gets a little thinner. The route gets a little clearer. Do it enough times and you've created a new pathway. Eventually, if you keep walking it while neglecting the old path, the new path becomes the default, and the old path grows over. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain physically rewires based on what you repeatedly do. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Walking the new path daily, even for short distances, creates more lasting change than occasionally hiking it for hours, then abandoning it for weeks. Repetition is what carves the groove, and once the groove is carved deep enough, behavior becomes automatic. You stop needing to force yourself because the new path has become the easy path. But here's what most people miss. Creating a new neural pathway isn't enough. You need to understand the habit loop that makes that pathway stick. Every habit, whether good or bad, follows the same pattern. Cue, routine, reward. Understanding this loop is how you engineer permanent change instead of temporary effort. The cue is the trigger that initiates the behavior. It could be a time of day, a location, an emotional state, a preceding action, something that signals your brain, this is when we do this thing. The more consistent your cue, the faster the habit forms. This is why having a fixed morning routine works so well. Same time, same place, same sequence. Your brain learns, when alarm goes off, we get up and do the morning anchor. The cue becomes reliable. The routine is the actual behavior, the thing you are trying to make automatic. This is what people usually focus on. I need to work out. I need to write. I need to study. But focusing only on the routine without understanding cues and rewards is why most habit attempts fail. The routine is just the middle part. You need the full loop. The reward is what makes your brain want to repeat the loop. This is crucial. Your brain needs a reason to prefer the new path over the old one. If there's no reward, or if the reward is too distant or abstract, your brain will stick with the familiar path even if it's not serving you. Because familiar feels safe, and safe conserves energy, and conserving energy is your brain's priority. So you need to engineer rewards into your new behaviors. Not massive rewards that undermine the behavior, like rewarding a workout with junk food, but genuine, positive reinforcement. The workout itself can be the reward if you focus on how good you feel afterward. The work session can be rewarding if you acknowledge the satisfaction of focused productivity. The key is making the reward immediate and noticeable. This is why tracking is so powerful. When you mark off a day on a calendar or log a completed task, you're giving yourself an immediate reward, visual proof of progress. Your brain registers, we did the thing, we got a reward, we should do this again. It seems simple, almost trivial, but these small rewards compound into powerful habit reinforcement. Now, here's where this gets deeper. The habit loop explains how behaviors become automatic. But we're not just trying to automate behaviors, we're trying to transform identity. And that requires understanding something more fundamental: the difference between outcome-based habits and identity-based habits. Most people approach discipline with an outcome focus. I want to lose weight, so I'll force myself to exercise. I want to earn more, so I'll force myself to work harder. I want better grades, so I'll force myself to study. Outcome-based motivation. It works initially because the outcome is motivating. But as soon as progress slows, as soon as obstacles appear, as soon as the outcome feels distant or uncertain, the motivation evaporates. This is why New Year's resolutions fail. By February, the initial excitement has worn off. The outcome still feels far away. The daily actions feel tedious. So people quit. They blame themselves for lacking discipline. But the real problem was the framework. Outcome-based habits are inherently fragile because they're dependent on external results you can't fully control. Identity-based habits work differently. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, you focus on who you want to become. Not, I want to run a marathon, but I want to become a runner. Not, I want to write a book, but I want to become a writer. Not, I want to build a business, but I want to become an entrepreneur. This shift seems subtle, but it's revolutionary. When your habits are tied to identity rather than outcomes, they become reinforced by a completely different mechanism. Every time you act consistent with your identity, you're not just moving toward a goal. You're proving something to yourself. You're gathering evidence about who you are. A runner runs. That's what runners do. So when it's time to go for a run and you don't feel like it, you're not debating whether this one run will get you closer to your marathon goal. You're asking, am I a runner or not? If the answer is yes, then runners run. That's not a debate. That's identity. This is incredibly powerful because identity is self-reinforcing in ways that outcomes never can be. Outcomes are external and uncertain. Identity is internal and within your control. You might not be able to control whether you lose the weight or make the money or get the grade. But you can absolutely control whether you show up consistent with the identity you're building. Every action becomes a vote. This is the framework I want you to internalize. You're not forcing yourself to do things to achieve outcomes. You're casting votes for the type of person you want to become. Want to become someone who's fit? Vote for it by working out. Want to become someone who's creative? Vote for it by creating. Want to become someone who's disciplined? Vote for it by honoring your commitments to yourself. One vote doesn't decide an election, but accumulated votes do. You don't need to win every single vote. You just need to win the majority. If you show up as the person you want to become more often than you don't, your self-concept shifts. You start to believe you are that person. And once you believe you are that person, acting consistent with that identity becomes the path of least resistance. This is the identity revolution. This is how forced action becomes natural action. This is how discipline stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like, this is just who I am. But you need to understand the timeline of this transformation, because it doesn't happen overnight. And knowing the stages helps you navigate them without quitting prematurely. Stage 1 is the friction stage. This is where you are right now if you just started implementing your discipline architecture. Everything feels hard. Resistance is high. You're forcing yourself constantly. You're very aware of the effort required. This stage typically lasts 2 to 4 weeks. It's the hardest stage. It's where most people quit because they think it will always feel this hard. It won't, but you have to push through. During this stage, your job is simple. Show up. Do the thing. Cast the vote. Don't worry about perfection. Don't worry about optimization. Just show up more days than you miss. Build the streak. Prove to yourself you can do hard things. This stage is about building evidence, not achieving outcomes. Stage 2 is the adaptation stage. This is around week 3 to week 8. Resistance starts to decrease. Not disappear, but decrease. Some days still feel hard, but other days feel neutral. Maybe even a few days where it feels almost good. Your brain is adapting. The neural pathways are forming. The new behaviors are becoming familiar, even if they're not yet automatic. During this stage, your job is to refine. Now that the basic behavior is established, you can start optimizing, adjusting timing, improving technique, finding what works best for you. But be careful. Don't use optimization as an excuse to start over or abandon consistency. You're refining, not redesigning. The core behavior stays constant. Stage 3 is the integration stage. This is month 3 and beyond. Something shifts here. The behaviors stop feeling like things you're making yourself do and start feeling like things you just do. Like brushing your teeth. You don't debate it. You don't need motivation. It's just part of your routine, part of who you are. This is where identity truly shifts. You're no longer someone who's trying to be disciplined. You're someone who is disciplined. You're no longer forcing yourself to do healthy things. You're a healthy person who occasionally indulges. The frame has flipped. And when the frame flips, everything becomes easier because you're acting in alignment with your identity rather than fighting against it. But here's what nobody warns you about. Even at stage 3, you're not immune to regression. Life happens. Stress spikes. Circumstances change. Unexpected challenges arise. And suddenly, you might find yourself slipping back into old patterns. This is normal. This doesn't mean you've failed or that the transformation wasn't real. It means you're human. The difference is how quickly you recover. Before your identity shifted, a slip meant a spiral. One missed day became a missed week, became a missed month, became I guess I'm just not disciplined. Now, a slip is just a slip. You notice it, you acknowledge it, and you return to your identity. Because you know who you are, one deviation doesn't erase that. This resilience is what makes identity-based change permanent. You're not relying on perfect circumstances or constant motivation. You're operating from a deep understanding of who you are. And even when you drift from that, you know how to find your way back. The path is carved. The identity is established. You just need to remember and return. Now, I need to tell you something uncomfortable. Something that most discipline content never addresses, because it's not motivating or inspirational. But it's true, and you need to hear it. Discipline has a dark side, and if you're not aware of it, it will sabotage you in ways you won't see coming. The dark side isn't about working too hard or burning out, though those are real risks. The dark side is more subtle, more insidious. It's about what you might sacrifice in pursuit of discipline, what you might lose without realizing it until it's too late. Because discipline, when taken to an extreme or applied rigidly, can become its own prison. You can become so focused on following your system that you lose flexibility, so committed to your routine that you damage relationships, so obsessed with productivity that you forget to actually live. Discipline becomes the master instead of the tool, and you wake up one day and realize you've built a perfectly disciplined life that you don't actually enjoy living. This isn't a theoretical warning. This is something many highly disciplined people face. They reach their goals and feel empty. They achieve their outcomes and wonder why it doesn't feel like they thought it would. They've sacrificed so much in pursuit of discipline that they've lost touch with why they wanted discipline in the first place. The solution isn't to abandon discipline. The solution is to be intentional about what you're disciplining yourself toward. To regularly check whether your discipline is serving your life or whether you're serving your discipline. To maintain the flexibility to adapt when circumstances change. To remember that discipline is a tool for building the life you want, not a life itself. This is the nuanced truth that Chapter 5 explores. How to maintain discipline without losing humanity. How to push yourself without breaking yourself. How to achieve without sacrificing what actually matters. How to know when to force yourself and when to rest. When to push harder and when to ease up. When discipline is serving you and when you're serving it. Because the final stage of mastering discipline isn't working harder, it's working smarter. It's developing the wisdom to know what deserves your discipline and what doesn't. It's learning that sometimes the most disciplined choice is to not follow your routine, to break your own rules, to prioritize something more important than your plan. That's where we're going in Chapter 5, into the mature practice of discipline. Beyond the beginner phase of forcing yourself mechanically, beyond the intermediate phase of building habits and identity, into the advanced understanding of when to apply discipline and when to release it, when to hold firm and when to adapt, when to push and when to to rest. But you can't skip to this stage. You can't practice flexibility before you've built structure. You can't break rules you haven't established. You can't adapt a system you haven't implemented. This is why the progression matters. First, you force yourself. Then you build habits. Then identity shifts. Then wisdom develops. Where are you in this progression? If you've been implementing the architecture for a week, you're in stage 1, friction, force. That's exactly where you should be. Stay there. Keep showing up. Keep casting votes. Trust that adaptation is coming if you persist. If you've been at this for a month or more, you're moving into stage 2. You should be noticing less resistance, more neutral or even positive days. This is when you refine, when you optimize, when you make the system truly yours. Don't mistake decreasing resistance for mastery and get complacent. You're adapting, but not yet integrated. If you've been living disciplined for 3 months or longer, you're entering stage 3, identity shift. This is where magic happens. But it's also where the dark side can emerge. This is when you need Chapter 5 most. When you need to understand the nuanced application of discipline rather than the mechanical application. So wherever you are in the progression, honor that stage. Don't rush ahead. Don't compare yourself to where others are. Just focus on doing the work required at your current stage, because each stage builds the foundation for the next. Skip a stage, and the structure collapses. One final thing before we transition to Chapter 5. I want you to pause and recognize something. If you've made it this far in this audiobook, if you've actually been implementing what you're hearing, you've already proven something profound. You've proven you can finish what you start. Most people don't make it to Chapter 4. Most people listen to Chapter 1, feel inspired, then never take action. Or they start implementing, but quit when it gets hard. You didn't. You pushed through. You're still here. That's not a small thing. That's evidence. Evidence that you're becoming someone different. Someone who follows through. Someone who does hard things. Someone who's disciplined. Hold on to that evidence, especially when things get difficult, especially when you have setbacks. Because you've already proven you're capable. Now we're just going to keep building, keep refining, keep deepening the transformation until discipline isn't something you do. It's simply who you are. Ready for the final stage? For the wisdom that takes discipline from rigid system to flexible strength? For the understanding of when to push and when to rest, for the mature practice that makes discipline sustainable for life, not just for a season? Then take a breath. Reflect on how far you've come. Acknowledge the person you're becoming. And when you're ready, let's complete this journey together. Chapter 5 is where everything comes full circle, where you learn to live with discipline rather than for discipline, where force becomes flow, where effort becomes ease, where the person you've been building finally becomes your natural state. See you there. Chapter 5. The Wisdom to Sustain. Discipline as a Way of Life. Here we are, the final chapter. If you've genuinely walked this path with me, if you've implemented the architecture, tracked your reality, forced yourself through resistance, and started to feel your identity shifting, then what I'm about to share will resonate at a level that words alone can't reach. Because you'll recognize it in your own experience. You'll feel the truth of it in your body, not just understand it in your mind. This chapter is different from what came before. We're not talking about building discipline anymore. We're talking about living with it, about the mature relationship with discipline that separates people who transform their lives temporarily from people who sustain that transformation for decades. About wisdom that can only be understood after you've done the hard work of forcing yourself enough times to know what it costs. And make no mistake, discipline costs something. Every time you choose the harder path, you're spending currency, energy, willpower, attention, comfort, sometimes relationships, sometimes spontaneity, sometimes the freedom to just do whatever you feel like in the moment. These costs are real, and if you're not aware of what you're spending, you'll eventually go bankrupt without realizing why. This is what separates sustainable discipline from self-destructive discipline. Self-destructive discipline ignores the costs until they become catastrophic. It pushes through pain without asking whether that pain is productive or destructive. It mistakes rigidity for strength and inflexibility for commitment. It builds a prison and calls it structure. Sustainable discipline is different. It's intelligent, adaptive, strategic. It knows when to push and when to rest, when to follow the system and when to break your own rules. When discipline serves your life and when you've started serving discipline. This is the wisdom we're exploring now. Let me start with a truth that might surprise you. The most disciplined people you admire, they're not following their routines perfectly every single day. They're not rigid machines executing the same program regardless of circumstances. That's not discipline. That's dysfunction. Real discipline includes the wisdom to recognize when breaking your routine is actually the most disciplined choice available. Here's an example. You've built a morning routine, alarm at 5, workout, reading, planning. It's been working beautifully for months. Your identity has shifted. You're someone who starts the day strong. Then, one night, your child gets sick. You're up until 3, taking care of them. Alarm goes off at 5. What's the disciplined choice? Most people think the disciplined choice is to force yourself up anyway, to honor your commitment, to not break the streak. But that's mechanical thinking, not wise thinking. The disciplined choice is to recognize that your body needs rest to function, that caring for your child was more important than your morning routine. That one adjusted morning doesn't erase your identity. That true discipline includes the flexibility to adapt to reality. This is the paradox that most disciplined content never addresses. Sometimes the most disciplined thing you can do is rest, is break your own rules, is choose relationships over routines, is acknowledge that circumstances have changed and rigidly following yesterday's plan would be stupid today. The question becomes, how do you know the difference? How do you distinguish between legitimate adaptation and convenient excuse, between wisdom and weakness, between being flexible and being lazy. This is where wisdom comes in. And wisdom can't be reduced to a formula, but I can give you a framework for developing it. First principle of sustainable discipline. Know your non-negotiables versus your negotiables. Not everything deserves the same level of discipline. Some things are foundational, core to who you are and who you're becoming. These are your non-negotiables. You don't negotiate on these except in true emergencies. They're the load-bearing walls of your life. Remove them and everything collapses. Other things are important but not foundational. These are your negotiables. You maintain them when possible, but you can adjust them when circumstances demand it without destroying your structure. The problem is most people never consciously decide which is which. So they either treat everything as non-negotiable and become rigid, or they treat everything as negotiable and lose all structure. Sit down and actually define this. What are the 3 to 5 things that are absolutely non-negotiable for you? The behaviors or principles that define who you are. For some people, it's their morning routine. For others, it's family dinner, or daily creation time, or physical training, or prayer or meditation. There's no universal answer, but you need to know your answer. Once you know your non-negotiables, everything else becomes negotiable. And that's liberating. You're not trying to maintain perfect discipline on 20 different fronts. You're holding firm on 3 to 5 core things and staying flexible on everything else. This is sustainable. This is how disciplined people maintain discipline for decades rather than burning out after months. Second principle. Recognize the difference between productive discomfort and destructive pain. Discipline involves discomfort. That's non-negotiable. Growth happens outside your comfort zone. But there's a crucial difference between productive discomfort that's building you and destructive pain that's breaking you. Learning to distinguish between them is essential for sustainability. Productive discomfort is temporary. It's challenging but not overwhelming. It leaves you tired but not depleted. It pushes you past your current capacity but not past your breaking point. After experiencing productive discomfort, you feel accomplished, stronger, like you've invested in yourself. It might have been hard, but it was worth it. Destructive pain is different. It's not just hard, it's damaging. It doesn't leave you tired, it leaves you depleted. It doesn't challenge you, it overwhelms you. And critically, it doesn't stop. Productive discomfort has a natural rhythm. Push, rest. Push, rest. Destructive pain just keeps pushing without adequate recovery. Eventually, something breaks. Most people push through both types of pain equally because they've been taught that discipline means never quitting. That real discipline means ignoring your body's signals and pushing harder. This is dangerous advice. Your body sends signals for a reason. Ignoring pain signals doesn't make you tough, it makes you injured. There's a massive difference between pushing through temporary discomfort and ignoring genuine distress signals. The wisdom is learning to read your own signals accurately. When your body says, "This is uncomfortable, but we're okay," push through. That's growth. When your body says, "Something is actually wrong here," listen. That's wisdom. This requires honesty, because your brain will often disguise laziness as distress signals. It will try to convince you that mild discomfort is dangerous, so you need to know the difference. Here's a test. After the activity, how do you feel? If you feel accomplished, energized despite being tired, satisfied with yourself, that was productive discomfort. If you feel depleted, resentful, like you just damaged something, that was destructive pain. Learn to distinguish them. Honor both messages, but respond to them differently. Third principle: build recovery into your system, not around it. Most people treat recovery as what happens when their system breaks down. They push, push, push until they crash. Then they recover because they have no choice. This is backwards. Disciplined people build recovery into their system before it becomes necessary. They schedule rest. They plan downtime. They create space for recovery before they're forced to by exhaustion. Think about elite athletes. They don't train at maximum intensity every single day. They have hard days and easy days, training days and rest days, intense periods and recovery periods. This isn't because they lack discipline. It's because they understand that adaptation happens during recovery, not during effort. You break down your muscles in the gym, but they grow stronger during rest. The same principle applies to everything. Your discipline system needs built-in recovery, not just physical rest, though that's important. Mental rest, emotional rest, creative rest. Days where you follow a lighter version of your routine. Days where you break your routine entirely. Days where you prioritize restoration over production. These aren't deviations from discipline. They're part of a sustainable discipline system. This is counterintuitive for most people. They think discipline means constant effort. But constant effort without recovery is the fastest path to burnout. And burned-out people don't maintain discipline. They collapse completely. Better to build in strategic rest than to force your body to shut you down completely. Fourth principle: protect what matters by being willing to sacrifice what doesn't. Discipline isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things consistently, which means saying no to many things so you can say yes to the few things that truly matter. This is a discipline that most people never develop. The discipline of subtraction rather than addition. Look at your life honestly. How much of what you're disciplining yourself to do actually matters? How much is just noise? How much are you maintaining out of habit or obligation rather than genuine importance? How much energy are you spending on things that don't align with who you want to become or the life you want to build? Sustainable discipline requires periodic audits, looking at all the things you're doing and asking, does this still serve me? Is this still worth the energy I'm investing? Or am I just doing it because I've always done it? Permission to stop doing things that no longer serve you is crucial. Otherwise, you accumulate commitments until you're drowning in obligations that don't matter. This is hard for disciplined people, because you've trained yourself to follow through on commitments, to honor your word, to maintain your systems. So the idea of stopping something feels like failure, like you're giving up or being lazy. But sometimes stopping is the most disciplined choice. Sometimes saying, "This no longer serves my highest priorities," and letting it go is wisdom, not weakness. Fifth principle: cultivate self-compassion alongside self-discipline. This might sound soft, like I'm contradicting everything we've built, but it's not. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It's not making excuses. It's not letting yourself off the hook. It's treating yourself with the same understanding you'd extend to someone you care about when they're struggling. You're going to have bad days. Days where you don't follow your system, where you break promises to yourself, where you fall back into old patterns. This is guaranteed. You're human. The question is, what happens next? Do you beat yourself up? Do you spiral into shame and self-criticism? Do you tell yourself you're weak and undisciplined and you'll never change? Or do you acknowledge what happened without judgment, understand why it happened, and recommit to your system? Self-compassion is what allows you to bounce back quickly instead of spiraling. Shame is not motivating. Shame is paralyzing. When you shame yourself for slipping, you're less likely to get back on track because facing your discipline system becomes associated with feeling terrible about yourself. Self-compassion says, "I messed up. That's data. What can I learn? What adjustment can I make? Now let's get back to it." No drama, no identity crisis, just acknowledgement and return. This is sustainable. Shame-based discipline is not. Eventually, you can't handle the shame anymore, and you abandon the whole thing to escape that feeling. The most sustainably disciplined people are often the most self-compassionate, not because they're soft on themselves, but because they understand that treating yourself harshly doesn't create lasting change. It creates resistance, creates fear of failure, creates perfectionism, all of which undermine discipline over time. Compassion combined with high standards is the sustainable combination. Sixth principle: remember why you started. This seems obvious, but it's profound. In the middle of forcing yourself day after day, it's easy to lose sight of the purpose. Discipline becomes about maintaining the system rather than serving the life you're building. You forget that discipline is a tool, not a destination. Regularly reconnect with your why. Why are you doing this? What life are you building? What version of yourself are you becoming? What freedom are you creating? What matters to you? Not what should matter. Not what matters to others. What actually matters to you? If you can't answer these questions clearly, your discipline is directionless, and directionless discipline eventually feels meaningless. This is why some highly disciplined people achieve all their goals and feel empty. They never connected the discipline to a meaningful purpose beyond the achievement itself. They climbed the mountain but forgot to ask why they were climbing. Don't make this mistake. Your discipline should be in service of something that genuinely matters to you. Otherwise, what's the point? Write down your why. Update it regularly, because your reasons will evolve as you grow. What motivates you today might not motivate you a year from now. That's okay. Let your purpose evolve. But always have a purpose. Always know why you're forcing yourself. Because when you know why, the how becomes easier. Now, as we approach the end of this audiobook, I want to address something important. You might be wondering what happens next. You've learned the principles. You've implemented the architecture. You've forced yourself enough times to start feeling the identity shift. You understand the wisdom of sustainable discipline. So, what now? The truth is, there is no what now. There's only continuing. Discipline isn't a destination you reach and then relax. It's a practice you live. The person you're becoming isn't someone you'll become someday. It's someone you're becoming every single day through the choices you make, through the actions you take, through the votes you cast for your identity. This doesn't end, but it does get easier. Not because the actions become effortless, but because they become integrated into who you are. Because your identity shifts to the point where not doing them feels wrong. Because the compounding effects start to show results that reinforce the behaviors. Because you've built enough evidence of your capability that you trust yourself completely. And that's the ultimate reward of discipline. Not the outcomes you achieve, though those are nice. The ultimate reward is self-trust. Knowing that when you tell yourself you'll do something, you'll do it. Knowing that you're capable of hard things. Knowing that you can force yourself through resistance when necessary. Knowing that who you are is someone you can count on. This self-trust changes everything. It creates a foundation of confidence that isn't dependent on external circumstances. It allows you to take bigger risks because you know you'll figure it out. It lets you pursue bigger dreams because you trust you'll do the work. It gives you a sense of internal stability that no amount of external success can provide. This is what's on the other side of forcing yourself for discipline. Not just achieved goals or improved results. A fundamentally different relationship with yourself. A deep, unshakable trust that you are capable. That you will follow through. That you can be counted on, especially by yourself. This is the real transformation. So, as we close this final chapter, I want you to understand something. Everything you need is already within you. The capacity for discipline, the ability to force yourself, the strength to push through resistance. It's all there. It always has been. This audiobook didn't give you anything you didn't already have. It just showed you how to access it, how to structure it, how to sustain it. The work ahead of you is simple, but not easy. Continue showing up. Continue casting votes for the person you're becoming. Continue forcing yourself when necessary and being wise enough to rest when needed. Continue building, refining, adapting. Continue being honest with yourself about what's working and what isn't. Continue choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Some days will be harder than others. Some weeks you'll feel like you're flying, and other weeks you'll feel like you're barely surviving. This is normal. This is the rhythm of a life lived with discipline. What matters is the trend over time. Are you generally moving in the right direction? Are you more disciplined now than you were 6 months ago? Are you becoming the person you want to become? If yes, you're succeeding, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when progress seems slow, even when you have setbacks. The trend is what matters, and the trend is determined by your daily votes, by your consistent showing up, by your willingness to force yourself when it counts. So this is where I leave you, not because the journey is over, but because the journey is yours now. You have the framework, you have the understanding, you have the experience of forcing yourself and seeing it work. You have everything you need. Now it's about living it, day after day, year after year, building a life of discipline that serves the life you want to live. Remember, discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is what creates freedom. Freedom to pursue what matters. Freedom to build what you envision. Freedom to become who you're meant to be. The discipline you force yourself into today is the freedom you'll live in tomorrow. Force yourself for discipline, not because it's easy, not because it feels good in the moment, but because the person you're becoming deserves the effort, because the life you're building requires the foundation, because you are capable of more than you've ever demanded of yourself. And the only way to discover what you're truly capable of is to force yourself to find out. This is your time, your moment, your transformation. Everything changes from here, but only if you act, only if you implement, only if you force yourself past the resistance into the person you're becoming. So go, start now, start today. Force yourself for discipline, and watch everything in your life transform as a result. The person you'll be a year from now is watching you right now. Make them proud. Make yourself proud. Show them what you're made of. Force yourself for discipline and become unstoppable.